Through the Gates is produced under the support of the Coloradans for Responsible Wildlife Management to enhance, promote, and defend the North American model of wildlife conservation and responsible wildlife management. That's our mission. We're engaged in fighting at every level so that wildlife management remains science-based and conservation continues to work for our wildlife. To learn more and join the movement, visit SaveTheHuntColorado.com. Well, January 6, 2026. And it is not an insurrection at the Capitol. We are preparing to launch our new podcast studio. And we're going to do a little bit of a compilation this episode here and try to tell people exactly what we're having to deal with, what we're having to weed through the sausage making process, and just how convoluted wildlife management has become because of the particular animal rights agenda and the ongoing efforts of this political administration in the state of Colorado to undermine and manipulate and erase all forms of consumptive use, and whether one considers it to be recreational or avocational or conflict resolution or for subsistence or whatever it is. These people want it gone. And so hopefully you find what we're doing over the course of the next year. We've got a year underneath our belt. We're moving forward for another year. We've got a big lineup and we've got a full boat, and we hope that everybody is willing to follow us along and help continue to support the cause in the fight. And as the shirt says, unite the fight to save the hunt. And so anyway, we'll get into that. But I wanted to mention, the last couple of weeks, there's been some things that have gone on that have been very, very troubling. There's been some coyote activity up in the North Front Range part of the state where some citizens, residents are saying, hey, we didn't sign up for this. Why isn't this stuff being taken care of? There's other individuals out there that would say, well, just coexist. But those individuals that are saying coexist aren't living in the areas where these coyotes are creating havoc and problems for the residents. And so we're going to see this push and pull and tug and push back and forth on a variety of different levels. But that's been going on. There's been issues about beaver conflict resolution that are still going on. And sadly enough, last week on New Year's Day, a hiker up around Glen Haven, outside of Estes Park, was attacked and killed by at least one mountain lion, if not two. Colorado Parks and Wildlife went in and removed 2 mountain lions. That individual hiker was found by other hikers. And for anybody who's followed the stories, I won't get into the details too much, but it just shows that we should be leaving up wildlife management to the experts. We should be leaving up wildlife management, which is hunting and fishing, which is part of the North American model of wildlife conservation. We should be leaving that up to the experts. We want to make sure that people understand we're not condoning people's opinions. They have the right to be able to have an opinion for whatever the hell they want. However, uneducated individuals making decisions about oil and gas or wildlife or habitat conservation, or, you name it. I don't want the donut guy, no offense to donut guys, I don't want the donut guy making my decisions that need to be done on behalf of Colorado's wildlife resources. I don't want the hairstylist making decisions on behalf of our oil and gas resources. I don't want a trash guy determining how we're going to turn around and build roads and bridges and overpasses. We have experts and we have fields that people are very well educated in. And when you're living with a living, breathing organism like what we are with wildlife and the habitat for that matter, the science is a key component of all this. And I think that one thing you're probably going to see through this compilation that we formulated is the people that I'm trying to call out. They don't talk about science. They don't talk about anything other than their wishes, wants, or desires, their emotions, their opinions, their perspectives. And when it gets down to it, they are no better than the donut guy There again, no offense to the donut guy or the trash guy or the hairstylist. They're no better than them when it comes to the issues that they continually gripe and complain about. And so I hope that you guys enjoy this compilation. I hope that you will do a further level of research when it comes to things that we're having to work on over the course of the next 60, 90, 100 days. And educate yourselves, because the facts are there. The data is there. It's just that some of these people don't want to listen to it. They don't want to use it because they have a particular agenda. And their agenda is to stop every single thing that Colorado Parks and Wildlife does, and every single license that Colorado Parks and Wildlife sells, and every single species that Colorado Parks and Wildlife has determined to be a game species. Whether it's a fur bearer, whether it's waterfowl, whether it's big game, whether it's small game. These individuals that we're talking about don't want Colorado Parks and Wildlife to do it. So, without further ado, we're going to have some push and pull, tug and push, whatever you want to call it. We hope you enjoy it. Follow us, subscribe, give us your feedback, and make sure that you continue to help save the hunt. Here's Through the Gates. The North American model of wildlife conservation is the greatest conservation model in the world. It's a success story that should be shared and celebrated because everybody is a part of it.
I told everyone over the last 7 years, whatever the animal issue is, whatever the species, from the tiniest invertebrate or insect all the way up to our charismatic megafauna, as they call them, I want to help. And I am open to being educated and using my platform in any way that I can.
If you heard First Gentleman Marlon Reis talking on the Wildlife Wire podcast with Mark Surls of Project Coyote and Samantha Miller, formerly of Cats Aren't Trophies, and now for the Center for Biological Diversity, which, by the way, has also got the citizens petition for the fur ban coming up in March of 2026. Have you heard him talk about he's trying to use his platform? He wants to turn around and help no matter what the megafauna or floral fauna or whatever the hell he ends up calling stuff. He wants to help at whatever level. And he wants to make sure that he is educated. He's willing to be educated. Well, I would beg to differ, because he's not been wanting to be educated in any way, shape, or form unless it comes from somebody that wants to stop, restrict, or prohibit all forms of consumptive use in wildlife management and agriculture for that matter. He does not want to be educated. He wants to stop it, and he wants to use this platform to be able to do that. We would hope that individuals would be able to figure out the difference between I want to help and I want to help stop you from doing what you're doing.
You can get a trapping license. With that license, you can trap and kill as many bobcats as you want. And Mark, I believe it's $35, right? For around there for a trapping license?
Yeah, $35 or $35 for a small game plus $10 for a fur bearer license.
So for
whatever
the
fur bearer is.
Yeah, for the low price of $35 to $45, you can kill as many bobcats or beavers or minks or martens as you want, and then you can sell their fur in Colorado.
Sam, it's so interesting that you brought up the price, and Mark, that you quoted, that is the dollar value that we attach to the life of these animals.
They talk about the price, the value that has been put on these animals' heads, specifically about fur bearers. But you could translate that into, or correlate that into, any license fee that goes into the wildlife resources and the makeup of what Colorado Parks and Wildlife, or any game agency for that matter, has to endure. They talk about this unlimited take that for $35, you buy the small game license, and then for a $10 permit, which, by the way, the Colorado Trappers and Predator Hunters Association multiple years ago advocated for the utilization of that $10 permit to make sure that Colorado Parks and Wildlife could compile additional data. That way you could actually synthesize information that was taken out of a specific user group of small game hunters, some of which pursued fur-bearing animals. We're the ones who did that. They didn't. We came up with the price structure. They didn't. We imposed fees on ourselves. They didn't. We wanted to make sure that we had additional data to be able to support what we were trying to accomplish. They weren't. So anyway, I digress, which I'm probably going to digress multiple times through this entire episode. But the $35 is something that is imposed because of the way the small game fees and structures have been imposed. Marlon, the First Gentleman, indicates that this is the value that we put on animals' heads. No, it's not, sir. It is not the value that we put on their heads. License fees are structured based upon the need to be able to create a funding mechanism under the North American model of wildlife conservation. Now, I could assume that Mr. Marlon Reis, the First Gentleman, and Samantha Miller and Mark Surls and a plethora of other individuals, I could assume that they would just as soon say, oh, well, the cost of a fur bearer license, which is not a license, Mark Surls, it's a permit, the cost of a fur bearer license is going to be $1,000. Or maybe it's $10,000. Or maybe it's $100,000. They don't want you to spend any money, but we'll get into some of these other financial contributions that we kick in down the road. They don't want you to spend any money. They don't think you should be able to buy a license for any of this stuff. So as you're listening through the compilation, start to pick out some of the things that they have alluded to and what they've insinuated and what they've alleged. And all they have done is give their opinions and their perspectives, and they don't talk about facts and data.
So I have to admit that I am very confused about everything, really.
Ew,
All in
good.
this program.
Marlon talks about being confused. I wonder where the hell that came from. We've all thought that for the last 7 years. He said, well, I have to just say that I'm very confused. We've talked this to death, and he was referencing the wolf mitigation plan, the wolf introduction plan, which I sat on. I sat on it for 16 of 18 months. I can tell him a little bit more about the wolf management plan than what he would like to know because he doesn't want to know what actually happened. But in any event, he's confused. Well, he was confused when he took this position of the First Gentleman. He's been confused through the entire process. And I'm sure that when he's out in January of 2027, he'll continue to remain confused.
I have to say that I've never seen, we have talked this to death. We had an incredible stakeholding process that included so many different people from all walks of life and, whether it was animal advocates, hunters, trappers, ranchers, farmers, all sitting at a table for 18 months discussing what should go into this plan. And then, coming to consensus about what the plan would be, releasing the plan, getting our Parks and Wildlife Commission to actually approve the plan, and then 1 month before, try to sabotage the plan and stop the wolves from coming. So I feel like we've got a lot of bad faith negotiators or people who are not telling us, who are misportraying their willingness to play together in the sandbox and to play nice.
So if you listen to Mr. Reis talk about the wolf management mitigation plan, the stakeholder group, and they talked about consensus and what was approved by the commission and that there was bad faith negotiators in this process. Well, let me tell you something, Mr. Reis. The bad faith negotiators that you claim primarily came from individuals outside of the stakeholder advisory group or the technical working group. It wasn't from within there, as you alleged during the Wildlife Wire podcast. It was outside, and it was outside because all of the pieces had not been put in place. There was no range riders, there was no compensation plan, there was no chronic depredation definition. There was no specific plan of action to be able to make sure that what was agreed upon, or what there was consensus, as you put it, there was consensus on what we had in the plan, and then the plan was not adhered to. The plan indicated that we would have these things in place. And the plan also indicated that we would not take conflict, depredating type wolves from one location, put them in another location. We wouldn't take original conflict type wolves from a state and bring them into the state of Colorado, let alone turn around and take them and capture them and put them in captivity and then keep them there to put them into some other place. That was not part of the plan. So you want to talk about bad faith negotiators? Don't blame it on the stakeholder advisory group. Don't blame it on the technical working group. And make sure that when you're alleging or insinuating something, that you're referencing the proper space or considering the technicalities that need to be, as you put it, to play nice. These individuals came to the table to turn around and try to do what was best that could possibly be done. And the plan was not adhered to. The appropriate measures were not taken to make sure that the plan could be put into place. I don't know how you guys are, but if I'm going on vacation, I have my suitcase and I've got all my accoutrements and accessories and clothes and stuff ready for it. I don't go on vacation and then turn around and go somewhere and buy a suitcase and then turn around and try to get clothes when I'm there. I do all the stuff ahead of time. That's called a plan. The plan that was adhered to on this stepped away from the introduction wolf management plan.
I am shocked at how many different ways there are to try to fight to stop it after it's already been voted on, rather than working within it. It seems like there's a lot of denial going on still.
Samantha Miller talks about there seems like there's a lot of denial going on because how many times can you go back and try to change something because of the will of the people? Isn't it ironic, Samantha, that when people don't like something that occurred without their approval, that then they go back and try to change it? That's not out of the normal human psyche to be able to turn around and do stuff like that. The fact of the matter is, Proposition 114 won by 1.8 or 1.9%. And while the majority of individuals are saying we don't have a problem with wolves, we have a problem with the lack of management of wolves or the lack of a plan that's been put into place to be able to turn around and address my concerns or your concerns or his concerns over on the Western Slope. None of that stuff was done. So anybody that's griping and complaining about the introduction process itself probably has some concerns because they don't think that things were taken appropriately into consideration for them to be able to turn around and deal with. Now, since you don't really understand why people could go back to the well to try to change something, how about look at Proposition 127? Proposition 127 and Ordinance 308, the fur ban in the city and county of Denver last year, that was defeated by 17 points. And now you want to go back and turn around and change it through the commission. You want to turn around and make it statewide when the largest city and county in the state of Colorado turn around and beat it and defeated it by 17 points. You want to turn around and have continually tried to, 2 weeks after the election in 2024 even, to go back and say what the people of the state of Colorado really meant to say when they voted against 127 was that they wanted you to do something, talking to the commission. They didn't say that, and that wasn't part of the damn ballot initiative. What it means is you're never happy with the results until the results are the way that you want them. I'm willing to turn around and say, you won on 114, but you lost your ass on 127. And you continually come back and say, why would people question the vote, speaking about wolves, but you're not turning around and speaking up about that when it comes to you and others questioning the outcome on 127 and 308.
This bothers me to no end. And I think part of it is just the absolute unpredictability that you referenced of turning out all of your cows or all of your sheep into the wilderness, and then 3 months later, seeing how many are left, and then sort of just assuming and being able to claim that the ones who didn't come back were taken out by native predators or wolves, when in fact it could have been a lightning bolt, it could have been a poison plant that they ate.
Birthing complications are more common.
Cattle rustling.
Cattle rustling, huge issue, right, in our state.
And then he wants to complain about the compensation plan that was created through the stakeholder advisory group and the combination of the technical working group, and that was done through the commission, especially after the fact, when wolves started depredating, because there wasn't a plan of action in place to say, this is part of the plan that we're going to follow and adhere to. But they make the claim in statements like what he just said about not knowing where your cattle are, how many cattle you had to start with, how many cattle you ended up with, or sheep, and then potentially blaming a lot of the depredation type things on natural occurrences, as they put it, whether it's rustling, cattle theft. That's happening all over the state. There's an occasion here and there. But with the amount of cattle that we have in the state of Colorado and the amount of people that we have in the state of Colorado, that's not a significant problem like what they indicate. They talk about birthing complications. They talk about noxious weeds. They talk about lightning strikes. A variety of different things could happen. However, the plan was created because the agriculture producers, the ranchers, the sheep growers, the wool growers, had to have some sort of guarantees that they were being protected for things that were beyond their control, that they could not turn around and do anything about unless they caught the animal in the act, creating havoc, killing, or creating conflict. They had to have that variance there to where it gave them a little bit of an opportunity, especially since the plan was never fully incorporated and in place, and all the pieces in the puzzle were not in the state of Colorado to be able to use. The flattery, the range riding, the schooling, the lessons, whatever the hell it might have been. It wasn't in place. The compensation needed to be taking place to be able to turn around and protect the agriculture producer, no matter whether it was on private or public land.
So we've created a system that's easy to abuse because it doesn't require, rigorous documentation.
Listen to what he said. We've created a system that's easy to abuse. You would probably know that because you're working in and out of the state government, so I guess you understand what is easy to abuse and what isn't easy to abuse.
What I've seen over the last 3 years is CPW maybe wishfully thinking that, by compensating, right, that by compensating these losses at a very high dollar value, they hoped that by, doing all of that would buy us some goodwill and maybe some more cooperation. But I think what they're finding is the more you give, the more gets taken.
Then he talks about goodwill, talks about the more that you give, the more that gets taken, because the compensation is too high. And his assumption is that whatever an agriculture producer says cannot be true, cannot be factual, cannot be anything other than the fabrication of lies and fallacies and falsehoods, just like what had been created on so many other levels with the state government.
I'm worried that we're now in a cycle where the news has sort of covered losses and covered what they would characterize as bad behavior by wolves, when in reality wolves are being wolves, and producers do have a responsibility.
And then he wants to blame the media. The media has covered the bad stuff and not the good stuff when it comes to wolves. And then it gives the bad impression to people. Well, look, When you give something to somebody that they didn't plan on having to deal with, and it's done by the vote of the people, and it becomes law, my suggestion would be, as they continually brag upon, this is the first time in the history of the world to be able to vote on reintroducing or introducing an endangered species, to vote on it, to be able to do so. They claim that as a victory. Well, that very well might be 150 or 200 years from now, but the people that are having to deal with it right now, they don't claim it as a victory. And what I would suggest is any state, including this one, that's thinking about doing this sort of activity of introducing an endangered species, supposedly by the will of the people, even though it's the smallest of margins, by the will of the people, that they take this into consideration and have second thoughts about how they're going to do it and when they're going to do it. And if they ever decide to do it, make sure that they got every single piece of that 1,000-piece puzzle in place before they actually start to enact it. As I said, I don't have a problem with wolves. I have a problem with people voting on wolves. I have a problem with the donut guy and the hairstylist and the Uber driver and the mechanic voting on wolves and never having to deal with it in any way, shape, or form. And the people that have to never had a chance to turn around and say, hey, wait a minute, put your hands up. We need to turn around and stop and have a conversation about this because you're not adhering to the practices of the management plan. We didn't want what we got, but we're trying to turn around and live with it within the confines of state and federal law, and you're not allowing us to do so because you consider us to be bad faith negotiators and bad apples.
When we go to committee hearings or commission meetings and we hear about these losses and we hear this rhetoric, well, we love the animals we're raising.
It's not rhetoric, Marlon. Doesn't have anything to do with rhetoric. You want to talk about rhetoric? Go back and listen to these podcasts that you're doing. Go back and listen to the statements that people turn around and kick out. This is people's lives that you're messing with. This is people's fortunes, their livelihoods, generations of people wondering how they're going to continually be able to survive in this landscape when you've got the undermining manipulation of agenda-driven politicians trying to turn around and take their lifestyle away. That's the rhetoric, trying to take it away.
Okay. So I will not call that into question. I'm sure that for the period of time that this animal is in your custody and you are raising that animal, that you are out there making sure that they have enough to eat, that they're comfortable, that mothers and calves are together. But you're offering one snapshot of a process that that will result in this cow being turned into a hamburger or a steak. And food, of course, as we know, is political, and so I'm sure that, there's an ability to compartmentalize your part, the part you play in the process. And I think that's what we sort of see is, okay, I care for, from day 1 to day 100. But on day 101, it's not my problem anymore. They're on the truck, they're headed to, the meat packer.
Then he says, well, I'm not going to question, but you already questioned it when you called it rhetoric. And he talks about the intent of somebody getting to a point to where they're going to make something into a hamburger or a steak. I've worked around the agriculture community for the better part of my adult life. We've raised cattle ourselves. My son's raised cattle. You know what the intent of that animal is if you believe in the process of human consumption. Now, people that don't believe in the process of human consumption might have a hard time understanding how somebody could say, I love, or I care, or respect, or I admire, and I want to turn around and make sure this animal has a healthy life. Listen to the next segment with Caitlin Taussig, a rancher from up around Kremling. She'll answer the question. She'll make the statement a lot better than what Marlon explains it.
We care. I am such an animal lover. I really am. I like almost get made fun of in my circles for this. Like, I don't like to do some things if I know it's gonna, bother animals, such as one of the practices that's pretty typical in ranching is burning ditches. And I'm like, oh, I don't want to, burn the mice out of their homes. I mean, that's the level of animal
Really?
love that I have for just all animals. And so we're raising these cattle and they have these beautiful, idyllic lives. And they run up on these beautiful pastures. We take care of them. We feed them in the winter. They're having these good lives. And so our hope for them is that they have one bad moment and a good death. And I talk about a good death to people a lot. And I think that can be, I think those of us who see life and death a lot, which is, it's such a part of our everyday life in ranching. You're right on the edge of the wild and you see life and death every day. But if you're living in an urban environment, you might not see that as much as we do. And so I talk about a good death as being like a fast death, not, getting torn apart by something or being still alive when you're getting eaten by a predator. A good death to me is something that a beef cow would experience. So a really good life and a good death. And that's an argument in favor of hunting as well. That's also what I would consider a good death. Animals that are dying of old age and starvation out in the wild or getting, predated upon by something else, that's a harsh reality. And these are not, dying in a hospital bed deaths, It's a harsh reality of wildlife and all life. So in trying to explain how much we love our animals, yes, they're ultimately a food animal. It's a beef animal. But I also see it as an honoring. Like they're nourishing us, and it's an honoring, and it's a give and take. And I look at our cow herd, and my mom can talk about our cow families back to the 70s. We can keep track of our matriarchal lines of cows. It's a matriarchal line, and we know who is the grandmother and the mother, and they have friends. Our cows have friends with each other, and we try to make sure that the cow friends go to the same pasture. I mean, it's this stewarding of livestock where it's almost we're in teamwork with each other.
Well, I think she did a pretty good job of explaining her life and her lifestyle and her livelihood and getting her point across from a boots on the ground level of experience. From somebody that's done this essentially all their lives for several generations and not having somebody that didn't know anything about any of this stuff before they turn around and became the first gentleman to step up and have their say about, I need to be educated to make sure that we help everybody that has a problem with any sort of consumptive use. I think Caitlin did a really good job. I did want to mention real quick, when Marlon said that, well, we all know that food is political. Only if you make it that way, but food is necessary. Food is imperative for survival. When the hell did food become political? Except for when politicians started meddling in other people's lives, saying what they should or shouldn't do, and what they should or shouldn't do by putting things in their body that they decide to eat. Food is not political. Politicians are political. First gentlemen are political. But food is not.
So over the next year and a half, we've got to get the wolf program right. And so that means getting the social piece right. And so that's a priority.
So Marlon says, over the next year and a half, we've got to get the wolf program right. He even admits the fact that it's not been right. And it's not been right because some wolves have died and some wolves have tried to escape and go back to the north and then got killed in Wyoming. They didn't get it right because the politicians and the animal rights activists turned around and screwed it up in the process. They didn't allow Colorado Parks and Wildlife, the scientists, to be able to do what they needed to do. They manipulated the process so CPW and maybe even the Department of Natural Resources or the Colorado Department of Agriculture could not do what they needed to do. The wolf program was not right. I'm glad he admits that, but he doesn't admit how to fix it or that they were the cause and the root of the problem.
That involves new messaging, and it involves new messengers, I think. People who can go into the communities, who can speak with a trusted voice, who don't feel betrayed.
Well, listen, he says now we need to turn around and get new messengers, and we need to get new messages. Well, they had some pretty good ones. Director Dan Prenslow, they got rid of him. Director Jeff Davis, they got rid of him. Sports person rep on the commission, Murphy Robinson, he left, resigned, stepped away because of a variety of different things, including conflict of interest or whatever. But you had some really good people that turn around and do this stuff. Some wildlife managers. And I'm not knocking the new acting director by any means, shape, or form. But when you have wildlife experts, what better messenger could you get out there when you're talking about science and data and the betterment of wildlife species? You had them in your hands, and you allowed them to turn around and go, or you pushed them out, or you forced them out, or you shut them up, and you made them sign non-disclosure agreements. Whatever the hell happened, the good people were there. You had people in place. You had quarterbacks in place to do what was necessary, and you decided through the administration, with your involvement, to make sure that they didn't get a chance to do so, and they couldn't enact science unless it was approved by the administration. Talk about political? I guess food is political if you're a wolf.
It also means a better media coverage, and also, frankly, some excitement. We haven't seen excitement around the fact that we are the first state to vote to bring back an endangered species. And we're not celebrating the Copper Creek Pack. Instead, we're always talking about what's wrong.
Well, we talk about the Copper Creek Pack and what's always wrong. Well, outside of them having pups and going with what they were trying to do, except for when they went off the playbook and started killing stuff that nobody ever thought that they would kill, there's a lot more that's been bad than there's been good. And a lot of it's because the public side of it, the interaction side of it, the manipulation side of it, the lack of management side of it, the lack of oversight of it, a lot of that has been the bad. And that's going to continually be in the news. And when he says we need better media, what he actually means is we need better media to turn around and suppress the bad stuff and just talk about the stuff that we know that the general public would like to hear. That would be the good stuff. We don't want anybody to know about the bad stuff. Well, when you're turning around and doing something of this magnitude and the way that it was done, there's a hell of a lot more bad than there is good. And granted, you put them both together and it wouldn't be as bad, but you haven't handled the process right from the start.
Another priority that we really want to get done, and I think you guys will appreciate this, is fur bearers. There's nothing less scientific, right, than unlimited take. And I've talked in the office about this. I've talked with CPW officials and really anyone who'd listen and just say, if you have an unlimited bag limit, doesn't that presume you have an infinite number of animals that you can kill?
Well, then he jumps into the topic of what they want to try to get accomplished before they're gone on January 12th of 2027. And he talks about fur bearers. And there's nothing that's less scientific than unlimited take. And, you know, some of these things are going to come to fruition over the course of the next 60 days. The fur bearer meeting will happen in March, either the 4th and 5th of March, somewhere in and around Denver area or at 6060 Broadway. But the bigger part of that equation is they keep talking about unlimited. And it's not unlimited. If somebody wanted to go out and harvest 12, they can do that. But the average harvest is 2 beavers or less than 2 bobcats. And that those numbers that are dissected down are done so because the realization of how many of those species that we have. Now, we don't know exact numbers of fur bearers, the 16 or 17 species of classification. We don't know exact numbers. But as I mentioned before in one of the other podcasts, we don't know how many freaking people we have in the state of Colorado either. You don't have to know every single beaver and every single drainage and every single tributary to know that you have a good population of stable beavers and that there's a limited amount of people that are going to go out and attempt to harvest those beavers. So if you have 50,000 beavers or 80,000 beavers or 12 million beavers, whatever the hell the number would be, and you have a small segment of the population that has the opportunity to harvest beavers, should they be able to harvest 2 or 5 or 20 or 30? It doesn't matter when you know you have a reoccurring population like what we have had because of the science-based wildlife management side of what Colorado Parks and Wildlife does. Look, I harvest beaver and I harvest bobcats and I harvest more than the average guy. And there's guys that probably harvest more than me, but there's a lot of people that harvest less because they just want to turn around and go out for one day. Maybe they can go out for a week. Maybe they don't have success and luck like other people do. Maybe they don't have the time. But the fact of the matter is, these statements that you can get unlimited numbers, in my mind, is nothing further from the truth. When you have a regulated season, let's just say on bobcats, from December 1st to February 28th, and they have to all be accounted for because of the federal CITES tag that has to be attached to them. There's only a certain amount of people that are going to go out and attempt to harvest those. And they're only doing it for a 3-month period, so it's not unlimited. Could it be unlimited that amount of time? In theory, if a guy was spending this time like Jeremiah Johnson living out in the woods for 90 days, but that doesn't happen either. Even myself with a wildlife control business, I don't get to turn around and go do what I would like to do some time or place to spend as much time in the field as what I possibly could. So unlimited is a phrase that maybe people misconstrue because they don't know what that means. They think that there's an unlimited season from January 1st to December 31st, and you can use all the tools in the toolbox, which in the state of Colorado, we can't. We can't use anything other than cages on public land or any other legal method of take, and nobody's out there shooting beavers or bobcats with a shotgun and a bow or a crossbow. So the unlimited side becomes less unlimited because of the way that we have to be able to do things here. But I digress again, as I said that I probably would. So we'll finish listening to Marlon, and then we'll turn around and comment on that.
Set any number. Just set a number so that we don't assume that there's an infinite number of animals available to kill.
Then he goes on and says, set any number. Doesn't matter what number, just set a number. Because if we don't have a number, it looks like we have an infinite amount of animals that we can kill. Well, that's not really true. We don't have an infinite number of anything. However, what number is good? Is it 1? Is it 2? Is it 100? They just want a number. They don't care about the science and what the science says. The science is indicated because we have a plethora of species and we have a viable population of all those species. The science is indicated that because of the harvest that we have and the numbers that are harvested on a regular basis, that we're not creating any specific detriment to any one of the 17 species of fur bearers because we're not unlimited. We look at what we do through the Colorado Trappers and Predator Hunters Association and the amount of fur-bearing animals that are harvested and brought to the auction for the sale, trade, or barter of said goods are minuscule compared to the total numbers of animals in the state. How do we know that? Because people continually do it over and over and over and over and have for the last 5 or 10 or 15 or 20 years in the same locations, and they've not extirpated anything, and they're not doing it in unlimited numbers because there's only a certain time frame, as I mentioned, and a certain amount of tools in the toolbox that we can utilize because you can only use cages on public land. You can only use cages for recreational or avocational purposes on private land. So it's not unlimited. The way that these guys want to continually push and pull figures and data and cliche terms and statistics is their perspective. It's an emotional response to something, for one, that they don't understand. For two, as you heard him say earlier, he needed to be educated on. But they need to be educated on the facts and the data, and they need to listen to the science-based wildlife managers and the agriculture producers and the hunters and the trappers and the people on the ground that are dealing with this stuff over and over and over and over. Not the donut guy, not the hairstylist, not the trash collector, but the science-based wildlife management experts.
But then there's also the question of, what is permissible in terms of hunting and trapping. And I think there's some really cruel, outdated methods that are still allowed and are still lawful. And I think they deserve to be looked at and reviewed and possibly outlawed, for purposes of stating Colorado values. We don't stand for cruelty. We, don't stand for unlimited taking from nature. We take what we need. We don't take everything.
Then he mentions the cruel, outdated practices. Well, in 1996, ladies and gentlemen, Amendment 14 was passed to take away the use of body gripping devices, cable restraint devices, and foothold type traps on public land for recreational purposes. So if they want to talk about cruel and outdated, you had multiple tools in the toolbox that are now not available for recreational or avocational harvest or take. As I mentioned earlier, cages only. You want to go out and trap a bobcat? You can only do it with a cage. You want to go out and trap a beaver? You can only do it with a $600 type cage. I can tell you that nobody is doing unlimited take with a $600 cage for an $18 valuable beaver. So if you want to turn around and say earlier in the podcast of the price that we put on something's head was done by the license, no, essentially the price that we put on something's head is done by the market, by the fur industry that's been driven and marketed for 800 to 1,000 plus years in some capacity. And it's cyclical. It goes up and down, and there's a variety of different reasons. People don't understand. They don't comprehend. And they can't educate themselves about something that they don't know about because they're too tainted and too opinionated, and their perspectives are too misleading to make sure that they try to get their point across when they don't have any facts or data. Mention the Colorado values. We don't stand for cruelty. No, we don't. But the best management practices and the tools that are utilized to be able to catch and restrain or harvest fur-bearing animals have been conducted and modified and adapted over the course of the last 20 some odd years. 40 some odd $million from Canada and the United States has been spent on making sure that the capture devices were the most effective, efficient tools that could be utilized for animal welfare and a combination of human and animal safety. It's funny that the same foothold trap that was designed in the 1820s is almost the exact same foothold trap that has been utilized today. Now, back in the 1820s, there wasn't a commercial type cage trap made, but those are fairly well effective and efficient at this point in time. But over 200 years, nobody's come up with a better device or a mechanism. They've modified and they've adapted the original to be more humane and more animal friendly. But they haven't changed it to the point to where they said, we're getting rid of this, now you've got that. No, they've adapted and modified it because of the best management practices. And who did that? The trappers and the hunters and the fur utilizers, to make sure that they were complying with modern day, contemporary, thoughtful minded processes to consider for animal husbandry, animal stewardship, and animal welfare. If you're looking to explore your opportunities to hunt out west, maybe try Colorado. If you're trying to get information about bighorn sheep, elk, deer, private land, public land, maybe it's everything that you want to do as far as pack-in trips. Maybe it's just having a pack trip decided for you, and then when you get there, you just hunt out of a drop camp. Make sure you check out the Colorado Outfitters Association. Colorado Outfitters Association here in the state of Colorado has got a numerous amount of outfitters that are members, and they can supply you with whatever you're looking to try to acquire and what you want to do for the hunt of a lifetime. For more information, check out the coloradooutfitters.org and make sure that you let them know that you heard about them with Through the Gates, and let them know that you're trying to continue to save the hunt in the state of Colorado. We always talk about supporting businesses that support our efforts to be able to save the hunt in Colorado. Well, the Colorado Shed Company in Penrose, Colorado, just outside Canyon City, is one of those partners. Colorado Shed has been building sheds in the state of Colorado for the last 10 years and is actually owned by sportsmen and women. They support the efforts of what the Coloradans for Responsible Wildlife Management has done, and they also support all the organizations that you're probably a member of. Whether you're looking for small modular type buildings, sheds for your property to store the extra hunting equipment, or maybe just to turn around and put that freezer in for all the meat that you've got, check out Colorado Sheds. They also do pole barns and can do custom manufacturing to whatever your heart desires. She sheds, man caves, it doesn't matter. Check out coloradosheds.com. Well, now that we've gone through a little bit of what Marlon and Mark Surls and Samantha Miller have talked about, and if you really want to get the gist of it, you can go back and look up that specific episode and listen to the whole thing. We just picked some highlights out of it. Pick the whole thing and listen to it, and listen to the interaction, and listen to the compilation of information that was distributed. And you get a better idea of where these individuals come from, where they're currently at, and where they want to go. Next on this compilation of, as Marlon put it, rhetoric, is an individual that testified at one of the last Colorado Parks and Wildlife Commission meetings in 2025, and he talks about eminent domain, and he talks about essentially confiscating private property and kicking the people off, and then allowing the wolves to be able to live in peace and harmony, I guess like the Chronicles of Narnia. But listen to what he has to say, and I'll comment on a few other components of what he says, but listen to what he has to say. And let me tell you something, ladies and gentlemen, this is not an offshoot. This is not one individual's belief. This is a belief of a lot of people that want to turn around and take hunters and recreationists, backpackers and mountain bikers, and agriculture producers and timber users and oil and gas companies, take them off of the landscape. Listen to what he says.
I've come to the conclusion that the only real way to solve the wolf-livestock conflict is for the federal government to buy out ranches and private property holdings in the most remote regions of the Rocky Mountains, so wolves can live in peace and privacy. The federal buyout should be voluntary to begin with, based on fair market prices. A second point, for those unwilling to act in the common good, the federal government should use the right of eminent domain as authorized in the Fifth Amendment of the U.S. Constitution. Let us uphold the U.S. Constitution in taking property with just compensation that benefits the public good. Humans and their activities have no place in the wildest parts of the Rocky Mountains. Third point, all public lands should be designated wilderness, terminating all grazing and commercial uses, because this is the only way to solve the biodiversity crisis, especially for apex predators and carnivores.
Did you hear what he said? He wants to kick all recreationists off. He wants to kick all commercial use off. That would mean outfitters. That would mean rafting companies. That would mean fishing guides. That would mean cross-country skiing trips and tours. He didn't even get into the ski areas themselves because all of that is on federal land, on forest land. I don't know how people can actually wake up in the morning and look at that and say that that is anything other than lunacy and rhetoric. But this is something that a lot of people that don't understand, and they would rather sacrifice humans and the way humans have lived so they can get what they want with wolves or what they call apex predators, because they want to solve biodiversity issues and climate change and global warming at the expense of you and I and every agriculture producer and every person that steps foot on public land, whether it's private, whether it's federal or whether it's state. They believe that we shouldn't have anything to do with any of it. They believe that public land should be essentially confiscated. And I'm going to say it point blank. I think when they talk about public land being confiscated and they talk about private land having an eminent domain component to it, you want to talk about a bigger issue than what we've got with private land agriculture people right now. Turn around and start having those conversations. Turn around and put that sort of stuff on the ballot. Turn around and have those people show up to somebody's doorstep. I guarantee it wouldn't be a pretty sight. And I guarantee that the majority of people don't believe this, but the majority of people don't believe the way some of these things are happening. And we have to make sure that people are educated about it and not like people like this.
Oh, hello. This is Mark from Yes on Prop 127, and you caught me just in time for a good story. This is a story about a man named Dan. Dan runs a group called Wildlife Deserves Better. That sounds nice. But Dan also runs a group called Colorado Predator Hunters and Trappers Association. That doesn't sound so nice. Oh, and he's an exterminator too. I don't think he likes animals. Dan gets a lot of money from a group called Safari Club International. I like safaris, but they also like to kill cats from around the world. And speaking of cats, look at that happy bobcat. Oh no, Dan put that cute bobcat in a trap. Eek! Now the bobcat's getting choked to death. Bobcats aren't the only thing that Dan wants to choke. He said that he wants to choke our campaign manager too. Vote yes on Prop 127 so no one's getting choked anymore.
If you just got a chance to listen to Mark Surls give his pajama adored bedtime story about me, the way that he put this together, it was done so as a satire type thing during the Proposition 127 campaign. And the reason I wanted to bring this up is because not only does he have something maybe several bricks shy of a full load, these are the type of people that want to change the way that science-based wildlife management is. And if you're listening to this, I would encourage you to go to the YouTube side and watch this podcast and watch a couple of these clips. Caitlin Tausick is a good one. Mark Surls is another one. That's a short bedtime story, but he tells this story with stick figures that he drew during the campaign, sitting in his pajamas. And that's the guy that Project Coyote picked to turn around and speak on behalf of educated, thoughtfully minded, emotional individuals that are really concerned about the welfare and the well-being of our animal resources in the state of Colorado, and that they know best more than the science-based wildlife managers at Colorado Parks and Wildlife. Listen to what he says If you get a chance, watch it, because these are the type of people that want to take over the management of Colorado's natural resources, wildlife, water, or public lands, and private lands for that matter. They want to tell you how to do it, when to do it, where to do it, with whom to do it, for how long to do it, why you shouldn't do it. Watch and listen, and you make your mind up. Would you rather have an extremist, or would you rather have a scientist? The next little segment here is something to where it's a group called Beavers for Wildlife. And kind of like in the tone of Mark Surls, they've created these cartoon characters of myself and a beaver who's actually going to the ballot box. If you haven't seen that, you could actually go look and see what it actually is about. But Brooke the Beaver, granted, stop and take a look at some of this stuff. Brooke the Beaver has a Facebook post for Beavers for Wildlife. And instead of actually showing themselves and actually showing who they are and what they stand for, they create these cartoons. And it really doesn't bother me at all. I think it's actually pretty comical. Not so much a good enough likeness to me. I mean, my beard is not that brown that they're going to really do that. But I got my vest, and they got kind of a belt buckle, and they do have my bear claw. I have better boots than what that cartoon guy does. But if you look at what they say and what they do, they're trying to translate it in from a comic deal. There again, it goes into, would you rather have scientist or extremist? But Brooke the Beaver even says, Dan, you're not a scientist. You're a lobbyist with traps. The wildlife part of your business only exists because there are still some left. Colorado's wildlife belongs to all of us, not just those who measure success in pelts per season. Well, Brooke the Beaver is right that Colorado's wildlife does belong to all of us. But a certain percentage of us actually pay to utilize and actually pay to help fund and actually engage in the process of the management of 961 species of wildlife, 78 of which are game species, what I've said over and over. But Brooke the Beaver doesn't fully comprehend. And when it says on this post, and when Coloradans try to weigh in, you scoff and call it ballot box biology. Translation, Brooke says, you don't want the public interfering with your version of management where anything with teeth, fur, or claws is a target. No, I don't want the public intervening or interfering with anything that we have 350 scientists to be able to turn around and manage our wildlife resources. I don't want the public deciding on something when they can't decide the difference between a mink and a pine marten, or a river otter and a beaver, or a muskrat and a prairie dog. And I know because I run a wildlife control business and I've seen those type of misinterpretations from people all the time. It's the same people that sit in front of the Colorado Parks and Wildlife Commission or go to the General Assembly and spew what they've been told so they know what to say to make it look like that's what they believe. They can't make decisions for themselves. And if they could, they wouldn't be creating cartoons and they wouldn't be creating fake Facebook and Instagram posts with individuals by the name of Brooke the Beaver. The next part that you hear has to do with a piece of Commissioner Jess Beaulieu that she said during the commission comments of the November commission meeting, in which she was adamantly trying to make sure that they got the fur bearer petitions and the beaver petitions lined up well in advance, prior than what Parks and Wildlife had originally intended on doing. And the reason being is because of the working groups that were established on the fur bearers and the beavers. And you've heard me talk about that many times before. But Commissioner Beaulieu decided that she wanted to make a grandstand out of things, and she wanted to turn around and let everybody know that these things needed to happen now. They needed to happen before they were previously scheduled. They needed to happen in a manner to where they could be brought up, the petitions be brought up, and they could vote on those petitions to stop all this senseless, unlimited harvest of fur-bearing animals. You can listen to that. And right immediately thereafter, you'll hear one of the CPW staffers, Mr. Brian Dreyer, who's our upper level senior staffer, that shows his frustration and shows his concern not only for staff, but to adhere to science and to maintain the science-based wildlife management side of what the agency does, knowing full well that he's talking to a commission that often does not do their homework before they come to a meeting. And some of the commissioners are so agenda-driven that they don't care about the science, and they don't care about the agency, and they don't care about the people or the plans or the protocol or the transparency or accountability. So listen to what Brian Dreyer says after Jess Beaulieu, and you'll see where some of this stuff is continually moving forward and how it's going to move the needle. Maybe just next week, January 14th and 15th, but also in March 4th and 5th at the commission meeting there.
I'd actually like to make a motion to add the 2 fur bearer petitions, the one titled Commercial Sale of Wildlife Fur and the mandatory check for bobcat, swift fox, and beaver to the January commission meeting agenda. I don't know how much time, I understand this might feel cold for staff. I feel like it's been in limbo for a while, and so I'm eager to just have the oldest one heard, or the oldest ones heard, since they're connected. And so would it make sense, is coming back tomorrow with more information helpful? Is this something where they need to spend months getting information from the working group? I know the working group is done, so I'm not sure what that looks like. I still want to hear both these petitions in early 2026.
For the record, again, Brian Dreyer, Assistant Director for Terrestrial. I think it's important to note a few things. We have staff working extremely hard on a number of topics right now. And one of those is this fur bearer working group. We also are working our tails off on trying to put forth a beaver management strategy for Colorado. And I think it's really important that when beaver being a fur-bearing species, which we're about to kind of, in the near term, put out a strategy on that, it's really important to look at these species in a holistic way and their take and all of these pieces. And so kind of doing this out of order in terms of how we had this planned, it really impacts us. And to be truthful with you, it's really tough on staff. This is not a great move for us to just kind of change everything that we have going with no heads up, for that matter. And so it is difficult for us to just switch gears. I don't have Mark Fier on because we didn't intend to deal with this morning. And so sorry about my frustration, but I try and be as proactive as I can with commissioners. And to get caught off guard like this is difficult. And I'll leave it at that.
You hear the frustration in Mr. Dreyer's voice? This is the sort of undermining manipulation or circumvention that has been attempted multiple times at many different levels, in and outside of meetings, behind the scenes. I can't tell you how many times Colorado Parks and Wildlife has had to stop and regroup and change, not because of science, because they were told to. I can't tell you how many times, with as much as I've been involved over the course of the last 8 years, with me sitting on the Wildlife Council and on the Habitat Stamp Committee and through the Colorado Outdoor Partnership and through the Sports Persons Roundtable and the Chronic Wasted Disease Working Group and the Stakeholder Advisory Group for Wolf Introduction and all of the other things that I've been involved in. There's been a lot of times when it's just pump the brakes, come to a complete stop, do a U-turn, do a detour, and go another direction. It wasn't because that's what they wanted to do. It wasn't because that's what the science said. It's because that's what they were told to do. And you're starting to see this level of manipulation and undermining this maybe get the best of this administration based upon what has happened with multiple directors and commissioners, press reports, or as Marlon Reis indicated, maybe not such a very good media because they're telling all the bad stories. Well, they wouldn't be telling the bad stories if there wasn't bad stories to tell. Listen to the rest of the testimony from different individuals.
Director Davis,
So I'm happy to add to the director comments just a regular update on where citizen petitions are. On the fur bear ones, I just want to be clear, like, we have a fur bear work group, and that is why those petitions are sitting there while we go through that fur bear work group process. The reality is our facilitator makes a valid point that if those petitions come forward, then there's no point in having the work group. And so we're trying to be very sensitive to have us go through the process that we designed. From that, we'll get recommendations, and those citizen petitions will move forward at the same time as those recommendations. That's how we designed that process. So we're not intentionally holding anything back other than we have a process for fur bearers. It's tough when we got a lot of work coming at us to hear, words that sound like it's staff's fault. And in this case, it's not. We have a good process going.
I think if we're going to follow the rules, we follow them for everyone. And this feels as though we're picking and choosing who or what we're following the rules for. I'd rather have our staff who work on this every single day bring it to us when we know we have the data and that's appropriate.
Dan Gibbs is got his hand up. Dan?
I think it's really important that as the commissioners contemplate if you're going to move a certain petition forward or whatever which way, that it doesn't catch CPW staff off guard. They work really hard with all the petitioners sometimes to work out understanding what the real goal is. Sometimes that takes some time to get a real understanding. Sometimes they can try to find a sweet spot. It just doesn't happen overnight. So having a good understanding of really where they're at with all the petitions to educate the commissioners, I think is really important before folks start voting on, okay, this is really important to me, so I'm going to jump over this and move it every which way. But we need to make sure that staff is ready.
We just witnessed what chaos looks like, and I'm worried that if we do this for this, we're going to continue to do that in perpetuity. And I won't do that for 4 years, by the way. And so, and I want to just say, since I have the mic, Chair, I'm going to take some executive privilege and say, I am so sorry that we make staff 5 minutes into the meeting feel chaotic and frustrated and all those things. I've been there before, and there's no place for that, and we got to fix that. And so I own that as a part of the commission, and know that I think we get a lot of things put our way, but we have to follow our policy.
Thank you, Chair, and I'm sorry for dominating this, but I have to say the same as Commissioner Robinson said. This is not fair to staff. And a year ago, when we dealt with this basically the first time as I was chair, my fear was, and I stated at commission, we're here for policy. So we have policy in place that we first off have to follow. If we don't like some of that policy, it's our job to change that policy. So I think that's where we're at today. We're asking to fray away from our policy to do something that is going to create us a lot of problems. And I'll stop now with this, but I think doing anything like this that doesn't follow our policy is going to create big problems for us in the near future.
If you want to support a company that supported the efforts to defeat Proposition 127, then you need to support Davis Tent. Davis Tent has provided quality canvas goods for outdoorsmen for the last 50 plus years. For more information, go to davistent.com. If you want to support another business that was instrumental in helping us defeat Proposition 127, check out Salida Gun Shop. Salida Gun Shop in Salida, Colorado provides quality products, expertise, and knowledge from individuals that actually do what they sell. Go to salidagunshop.com. Listen to the advice of Cameron Haynes and support companies that are supporting your cause and your efforts. Minturn Anglers is one of those companies. Minturn Anglers provides product and fishing excursions in Colorado and are second to none. For more information, go to minturnanglers.com.
Mark Surls, Colorado and Northern Rockies coordinator for Project Coyote. As you vote on updates this morning, I would like to acknowledge the effort that went into the East Slope mountain lion management plan. In my view, it's the most comprehensive mountain lion plan I've seen in Colorado. That said, it's important to recognize that hunting lions in Colorado is purely recreational and is not necessary to manage their population or reduce conflicts.
Listen to that part about Mark Surls when he testified. It was the most comprehensive mountain lion management plan referenced in the East Slope Mountain Lion Management Plan. However, he says, there's essentially no justification to have any sort of hunting because that's purely recreational when it comes to mountain lions. So it's the most comprehensive plan that he has seen in the state of Colorado. However, he doesn't think we should be able to use it because the mountain lion management plan incorporates hunting, and hunting is only recreational.
For God's sake, let's start protecting and respecting these animals and take hunting off the table. Recognize wolves as a vital part of our landscape. We don't need to manage everything. Let the buffalo, wolves, and all wildlife grow old without human intervention.
Listen to the next public testimony. Hear what she said? Let's take all hunting off the table. We don't need to manage everything, she says. Well, that's where we probably disagree because with almost 6 million people in the state of Colorado, 350 million people throughout the country, you got to manage stuff to be able to turn around and live within the confines and the habitat that's still available that man and beast has not taken up. And keep in mind, as I continually say, I'm a wildlife control operator. I deal with stuff when animals move into people's property. They move into their industrial buildings. They move into their power plants. They move into their grocery stores. They move into their residential properties, whether it's a first or second home. They move into anywhere that they can turn around and take up occupancy. They do so. And I don't care whether it's squirrels or prairie dogs or coyotes or badgers or bears or bats or pigeons or whatever. Not everything has to be killed, but it has to be managed. It has to be managed. If we don't have the people that we have here, maybe it doesn't have to be managed. But when we have this amount of people, it has to be managed. So when they say take hunting off the table, just stop hunting altogether and listen to the other testimony of the individual talking about eminent domain and kicking all the people off of public land, making it wilderness that you can't go into and you can't camp and you can't mountain bike and you can't log and you can't cross-country ski. This is their objective, ladies and gentlemen, to stop it all. And when they elect people or appoint people or hire people to put in the right spots, hey, when you can run the stagecoach, you can tell it where the hell to go, no matter how many horses are. When you have the ball, you can run whatever play you want. And I hate to get politics involved on all of this, but, Marlon Reis already said it. Well, food is political, so I guess everything else is political. The politics that have been created over the course of the last 7.5 years are undeniably the most restrictive and prohibitive when it comes to our natural resources in the state of Colorado. Now, certain individuals, including Marlon Reis and Governor Polis, would disagree. But this stuff is going to continually go on, and it's going to continually be in the news when they are gone. January 12th, 2027, when they are gone, it's going to continually be in the news. Why? Because it has been prior to when they got here. The biggest difference is they've stuck their nose into every single aspect of it because they have opinions and they have perspectives. And they don't really give a rat's ass about the science. They don't really give a rat's ass about the data. And they don't really give a rat's ass about the animal species. They want to talk about individual animals. Continue to listen.
Agriculture, hunting, fishing, and forestry all combined contribute less than 1% to the gross domestic product of the state of Colorado.
Did you hear that, lady? Agriculture, hunting, fishing, timber, forestry, all that stuff combined create less than 1% of gross domestic product. Less than 1% of gross domestic product. Do you really believe that? That agriculture, hunting and fishing, recreation, timber, oil and gas create less than 1% of gross domestic. Who the hell do these people think they're talking to? The dumbest bastards on the planet?
And for them to totally control the management of our wildlife over the wishes of the public and taxpayers in Colorado is not right. The public's wishes need to be considered and not labeled as political.
Just like with any other numbers that you could possibly get, you could turn around and dissect things to where you could come out with higher numbers or lower numbers on any of it. But what I would say is when you add all of the gross domestic product numbers in on top of things, it's hard to decipher what that individual there testified about because she just kind of threw it out with the bathwater. And when you get into the nut cutting, the splitting of the hairs on gross domestic product, there's a lot of things that you could turn around and throw in that people don't account for. They don't consider. And what I would say is if people would do their homework, they would find out the economic benefit as opposed to gross domestic product. The trickle-down effect of hunting and fishing in itself is $7.25 billion. All of agriculture, food sources, and so forth, somewhere in the neighborhood of around $47 billion. If you want to get into forestry, if you want to look at this or that, you could find numbers on the internet to turn around and say, this is 1.6%, or this is 3.8%, or that's 7.9%. You can find whatever numbers that you want to find. But the fact of the matter is, it doesn't matter what numbers you come up with. What she references is that all of this should be managed by the will of the people. And I want to turn around and throw this in, that the will of the people, for instance, I'm willing to concede the will of the people voted by a very small margin on Proposition 114, and that's what we're going with. Then let the people manage the stuff how they need to manage it. Don't turn around and take your victory and then turn around and try to manipulate it because you didn't get exactly what you wanted, even though you won the election. But at the same time, just as I alluded to earlier in the podcast, when you turn around and lose something like they did on 127, the bobcat and the mountain lion issue, they lost by 10.5 points. Then turn around and lick your wounds and go home because you lost. Quit trying to change the stuff that you're griping about, people trying to change on something that you guys won. Those are the things that I think that the average person would look at and go, wait a minute. What's good for the goose is good for the gander, right? If you won over here and you're griping about somebody trying to change it, then don't be a hypocrite and then turn around and try to change on something that you lost. Politics is politics. Politicians make politics. We don't have to turn around and put up with what we've been dealing with for the next 2 gubernatorial terms if we would just elect the right people, if they would just be able to appoint the right people, and if they would let the people that are hired in the positions to do the work that needs to be done, let them do the work. Shouldn't be that big of a deal, but as Marlon Reis said, food is political. A lot of other things are more political than food. But if we're going to continually make food political, I guess that's where we're going to end up drawing the line on a lot of different people because we all have to eat. And a lot of us aren't going to like us being told what we're going to have to eat or how we're going to get it.
I think we can all agree that it's a lot easier for us to get food than it is for wild animals who have to hunt. They have to hunt their food down, you know. They don't get to go to King Supers.
We have sound bites and audio clips, audio video clips of a variety of different things over the course of the last 7 years. And it's amazing how when you get an individual who has not been elected, like Marlon Reis, essentially he's not been appointed except for the fact that he's the governor's spouse. But for him to come on and say, this is their plan or their agenda over the course of the next or the remainder of their term. Nobody elected him. His name wasn't on the ballot. But he has been put into a position of influence to where he can draw lines of favoritism and provide a level of his supposed self-anointed authority and level of expertise on a variety of different subjects that he has now had to become educated about over the course of the last 7.5 years. And I tell you what, ladies and gentlemen, this is something that's going to continually surface that you're going to see, and you'll be able to pay attention to a variety of different things. And what I will tell you, it's a sad state of affairs when the vote of the people that was so controversial sets the tone and narrative for wildlife management straight across the board and creates a level of anxiety and animosity between the people that live on the ground and the people that have to manage the problem that they've been given, not that they chose to. Wolves were voted on by people that had no idea what they were getting themselves into or what they were giving to anybody else. What my fear is that when we start talking about further levels of bobcats and mountain lions and beavers and fur bearers and buffalo and prairie dogs and invertebrates and all the other stuff that goes into this ecosystem level of biodiversity, when we start having these conversations at these levels, why the hell do we have an agency with 350 scientists, 1,100 and some odd full-time employees between parks and wildlife, 1,100 and some odd interns and temporary staff through summer seasons? Why do we have them if we're going to continually go back to the well and ask people's opinions about something that they do not know about? Over the course of the next several weeks and months, we're going to dissect into what we could possibly get into with our upcoming guests that we have in our new studio. We're going to try to give as much information and compile that information appropriately. And if you like it, let us know. If you don't, tune in somewhere else. Guess we'll see you at a commission meeting. Guess we'll see you at a General Assembly hearing at the legislature. But know, on both sides of this coin, we are going to continue to uphold the North American model of wildlife conservation and responsible science-based wildlife management. And I'm not saying it that I know it, but I'm going to support the ones that do. And the ones that have been doing it for the course of the last 125 years, a lot of which have been in this agency in the state of Colorado for 15 or 20 or 25 or 30 years. If you know of stuff that we need to cover, drop us a line, give us a private message on one of our Instagram posts or a Facebook post. Go to SaveTheHuntColorado.com. Subscribe, share, whatever you need to do. We look forward to continuing to try to serve and get the message out because it's important, it's validated, it's justified, and I think that the general public needs to continually hear the truth. And while I have an opinion about statements that are made, I'm not making statements about the experts that are making the statements that are then being told to shut the hell up and not give those statements. We appreciate your support. This is going to be an interesting first quarter. It's going to be an interesting second quarter. And if you're like most of us on our side of the aisle, I'm sure that you're just counting down to January 12th, 2027, when we can actually say, no matter who it is, that we have a new governor. And hopefully, that new governor doesn't bring the first gentleman or a first lady in that wants to continually be an animal rights extremist. And as Marlon Reis said at the beginning of this podcast, to be educated. Until next time, aim small, miss small, and continue to save the hunt.
Thanks for joining us for this episode of Through the Gates. For more content like this, make sure that you like, follow, and subscribe on all of our channels.